Hello and welcome to Matchup Plus Plus, the 6 Plus Plus show that shows you how to match up plus plus to the UKTC meta.
Yeah.
I'm Jack, and I'm joined once again by Tom.
Hello, everybody.
And this week we're covering the last three factions on our go around. I had hoped to get these out before Christmas, but scheduling is just a nightmare.
We're beating the slate. That's the main thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're beating the slate, and then we can go around. What I'm going to start doing after this is doing armies individually, since Necrons and Admech are out, and because I haven't covered Admech yet, but they've changed so much. I think they're worthy of a whole video to themselves with the words attachments
Definitely.
and stuff. So let's crack on. Let's get on to start off with Thousand Suns. This is why you're here, Tom.
Yeah, I know. My expertise. Oh, God.
Right. Caveat for this episode. The stats that I've used here, I have not included the sort of Necron Admech meta, because there's only like one event in that, and like everything's on single digit games, so there's not really enough data to pull any meaningful conclusions from.
Sure.
So I've just stuck to the pre that. So if that seems a little bit out of date, what you see online, then this is why. Okay, so starting off with Thousand Suns, so they perform best against Death Guard with a 60% win rate. Eldari, funnily enough, one of the only factions that have a positive win rate against Eldari, the 56% win rate. And Chaos Knights with a 70% win rate.
Oh, interesting.
Then we've got their worst performing factions. They got Orcs at 39%, Tau at 42%, and Dark Angels at 44%. The overall win rate is 50%, play rate 3%, and they've got 2 event wins.
Okay.
So what do you think of that, Tom?
I'm seeing a lot of things that make sense there. Yeah, I mean, so they're known to be a good Eldari counter because they have a lot of out of phase movement that works after Phantasm. So they've got a lot of ways of chasing after and getting lines on Eldar. A lot of their key powers like Doom Bolt or Remove Save really hurt either small Eldar units or big ones like Wraithguard. So they've got very good tools for those, and Magnus has guns that absolutely rinse Eldar units. So I think that was a matchup people used Thousand Suns for in the summer in WTC. It doesn't surprise me that it's still a good one for them, even if they're a bit weaker now. Death Guard, it makes sense. They do a lot of mortal wounds, and they've got good save stripping, which goes through Plague Marine. So again, good tools for that, and Death Guard are quite slow. Gives Thousand Suns a lot of play around them with all the additional jank that they have. Chaos Knights is an interesting one. I found that very tough. I lost that matchup at the weekend, so I'm obviously not that good at them yet. But again, they're very good at removing vehicles, and they can stand off Chaos Knights and deal with them over time. So I think if you can play that matchup effectively over time, Magnus is going to go through multiple little baby knights as long as you don't lose him. So I can see how that's one that they can control and can manage as well. As for the worst against, yeah, I mean, Orcs, just so many units and assets, just overwhelms them, activation locks them. Tau, I guess, when they do connect with Thousand Suns, are just going to destroy any units that they do manage to shoot. Dark Angel is an interesting one. I guess that's your kind of Deathwing Knight effect, stifling all the damage, chewing up all of the attacks and just giving them serious problems to deal with.
Yeah. I have to, in terms of sort of as a faction expert, how much mortal wound output in comparison to what they used to have in say 9th edition would you say the Thousand Suns have now?
It's not as much, and it's not as army wide. So in terms of Doombolt, they'll have a couple of focused mortal wound bombs in a given turn, and then they have a lot of ways to get dev wounds through their shooting. But again, it's mostly tied to the reroll hits and wounds with psychic weapons strat, which they can proc in a couple of places. So that's still solid and still very doable. But typically that'll be on Magnus. I think they often suffer from being able to get all the wombo combos off at the same time. So other dev wounds are generally a bit more incidental, except where you've got kind of sort of jumped up and tuned up sorcerer characters or infernal masters with rubrics. So that it is an army that does dev wounds and mortal wounds particularly well. I think it's still very good at it. Doesn't have it quite in the same abundance it did pre adjustments, but it's still very, very good at that. That's the main way in which it gets through things.
I guess pre-last hit, it's like they would have been like one of the premier mortal wound armies just because of...
Yeah, because you had... the thing then was, you could be chaining the grenade strat using the free strat Cabal power and things like that on top of everything else, so you could really pump out mortal wounds and dev wounds from just one source. It's not quite like that. Now it does need to come from several places, but it's still, if something gets close and they start hosing it down, it's going to take horrific damage.
Okay. Right. Well, let's move on to the next page we got here. So the most wanted units. I found this really interesting looking over the units for Thousand Suns because
Mm.
there is quite a there's a heavy use of rubric remains, but then beyond that, it tends to get a bit like it's like a little bit mixed.
I
I guess.
totally agree. There's people trying a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to say, but I picked up a few that I saw in several lists. First one is Magnus. So yeah, I mean, why do people take Magnus, Tom?
Mostly, he did nothing wrong.
Yeah,
I think the key thing with Magnus is just that he is this enormous shooting and melee destroyer, right? He's incredibly effective, especially once he gets full rerolls to hit and wound. He's got a very good damage 3 gun and a very good damage 3 weapon, so he just goes through targets very aggressively. He's incredibly fast, -1 damage or extra speed on him, which with double moving in Thousand Suns gives you enormous reach. And 2-up save, -1 damage, often very able to pick his spots on the board, so he's hard to shoot at as well. He also gives you your +1 to hit and wound with Psychers. So usually, if you're dropping a squad over with the Umbralipic crystal and putting them next to him, you're getting the most possible output from that. But also, if he's babysitting Psychers and they're doing shooting, they're doing much better as well. But crucially, he gets those buffs from himself. So no modifiers to hit and wound are going to slow him down. Really, he's just still going to be just as dangerous. So he's also really good for the kind of damage blanking and frustrating type tricks they have. They've got reroll save, they've got blanker save. So when you're firing heavy guns into a large target, he creates a real problem in that because it always takes a massive commitment to actually kill him. And so yeah, he's just an all rounder and an absolute star really, and he wins games on his own.
I feel like Magnus is like a microcosm for Thousand Suns as a faction as a
Yes,
whole, which makes
completely.
sense because there's a lot of knobs you can tweak. Like you can just invest more and more in a unit and make it better, right? You can just put
Yeah,
you could just do nothing, right? And that unit just does its thing and it's fine. Or you can put in 1 command point, 2 command points, 3 command
yeah,
points, you know, 15 cabal points, up
yeah,
to and you can just make this unit do more and more.
exactly.
Which is really what the faction's all about, right? It's all about these
Yeah,
combos, which kind of makes it incredibly difficult to play against if you haven't done so before.
completely. Completely, yeah. I think the damage output that they can concentrate in one place is among the highest in the game. In terms of the versatility of it and the different types of units it can go through if you layer the right combinations. I think the other thing with Magnus is that the army lives and dies by him, right? If Magnus goes down turn 2, turn 3, typically the army's going to collapse. But if he's still there in the late game, it becomes incredibly difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, he's a huge chunk of your army, right? How many points is
Yeah,
he?
400 and something. He's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up, probably the most common unit you would see out of any Thousand Sun list is the Rubric Marines.
Yeah, rubrics are just very, very good, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're innate rulers that they reroll ones to wound, reroll wounds, full rerolls to wound if their target's on objective.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that makes them kind of unique is that they can all take Warp Flamers.
Yes.
Usually you see the whole unit of Warp Flamers, but then the sorcerer with a Warp Flame pistol, and then
Yes.
I can't remember the cannon. I can't remember
Yeah, the Soul
White
Reaper cannon, right?
Soul
Yeah.
Reaper cannon. Yes, sorry. That's what you normally see as their loadout in fives or tens. If you want to, again, it's as if you want to concentrate lots of like
Yeah.
CP and Cabal points on a single unit.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I mean, Rubric Marines as they are, I guess they're more of a vector for channeling your CP and Cabal points
Yeah,
into
that's
damage output.
yeah. You need them to babysit the characters, 'cause otherwise the characters get killed. You get extra cabal from having rubrics, and this is why you see so many. Is that character plus rubrics is your best way of just getting lots and lots of cabal points into the army in a sort of cost-effective way. And they can play the objectives and trade and other things as well, but they're your workhorse. They can reliably hurt most things on objectives. Not off objectives, but on objectives. Actually, they're a bit like, I guess, Immortals and other things we're seeing at the moment, wherever that rule exists, the output is so much better when brawling over objectives, and suddenly drops off when you're not. And they're another one of those units, right? It's 105 points, it's just a few weapons, you look at it, shouldn't be that great, but again, if you're firing at something on an objective, you've removed its save, you've doom bolted it, they can just hose down a tank very happily, and there's not a lot of basic infantry that can do that.
Yeah. Okay, so then the last one we have here is Araman.
Yep.
Aramon's interesting in the sense that he's not a very complex data sheet,
No.
but his benefit is incredibly obvious as
Yes.
to why you would take him.
Yes. Yeah, so the free ritual, that's actually once per battle rather than once per turn, but it's still phenomenally powerful, right? Because you can just, again, in a key moment, you need a free Doom Bolt or you need a free, remove save, which costs 9, very expensive. So being able to do that and actually still pay for all your other jank is huge. The +1 to wound is good. I think at the moment, the army's lacking a little in terms of points, and you saw people trying him with like a 10 brick of flamers just to really leverage the +1 to wound, but that's very much a one and done. And the other key thing with Araman is that he gives you 3 Cabal points, right? So you need Magnus and Araman. That gives you your baseline 7 before you start with anything else. That's already a Doom Bolt paid for. So he's someone who needs to stay alive in the game. He's not terrible in combat. He's got an AP1 damage 3 weapon, quite a lot of attacks. And he's got a one-shot gun, which is negligible. But yeah, it's that free ritual just gives you your go turn moment. You know, he's going to step out, pump something else that you need. Maybe team up with the Lord of Forbidden Law, who's double tapping it somewhere else, and then you could have 2 units with no saves as you hit them with your army, which is obviously a big deal.
What units did Araman join again? Is it just rubrics?
It's rubrics, yeah. It's just rubrics. He'd be amazing in Scarab Occult. But they're too afraid to go there, you cowards.
Okay, so I went to find a list for.
Hey!
I think it would be a bit too egotistical to put your list on there, Tom.
Oh, my list was also did terribly and was a bad list. So I'm still in the learning. I'm in the learning stage, guys.
So this is Paul Bridges lost from the Nottingham GT. He's currently the top ranked thousands player in the UK, so it made sense to take his list. Yep. He has a Magnus, Araman, an Exalted Sorcerer on disc with Lord of Forbidden Law. I think you mentioned before that lets you do a ritual for a second time, right?
Yes, exactly that. Hugely important in the army.
So we've got an Infernal Master with Arcane Vortex.
Yep.
What's that one again?
So that's just +1 strength and damage on his psychic weapon, which with the Infernal Master, it's a 2d6 flamer. It's very good when it goes off with Dev Wounds.
Okay. Then we've got a Thousand Suns Demon Prince.
Super useful, gives you a stealth aura, which helps to keep all this shit alive.
We've got a sorcerer with the Umbralific Crystal, which is a once per game teleport, right?
That's right, that's your teleport. And this list builds on the trend we've seen a lot recently, which is just you put it on just 5 rubrics. You know, the kind of, here comes a huge Brit. It doesn't tend to work because T-Suns aren't really able to take the clap back. So just throwing away Cabal points early on is typically not great. So you can either use it just to skirmish and remove some screens and some chaff, or you can save it for the late game when suddenly it's going to sneak in and get somewhere even more valuable. So running it with a 5 seems to be very commonly done now.
We just have a Naked Sorcerer as well.
It's worth saying sorcerers are funny, right? 2d6 shots with a pistol that is sustained 3, right? And you can obviously have it re-rolling its hits and wounds with the strat, or just re-rolling wounds on objective. These things can do quite a shocking amount of mortals if they happen to pop off in a given turn. I had one do 8 mortals to obliterators at the weekend. It was amazing. Super fun.
Like if you were to roll all 6s followed by all 6s, it would, because how many shots is it again on the gun?
2d6 on the gun.
So you could do 12, 20, 30, you could do like 36 more wounds if you just rolled all 6s.
It could get phenomenally silly. I always want to run Arcane Vortex on it, so those are damage 2. Just for the sheer funniness of like the nuke that could go off, but 12-inch range is not as versatile, and the Infernal Master is better for Overwatch and things like that.
Because next up we have, as mentioned before, 6x5 Rubric Marines in this standard configuration.
Yep, very solid.
We got a Rhino. And we have 2 units of 3 Zangor Enlightened, which I believe just to run around and do objectives.
Yeah, they're just your job doers, screeners. You can double move them to steal points, that kind of stuff. They're quite fun and cheap.
Are there any other commonly used units you think that you are likely to see on the tournament?
No, in all honesty, I think these are the key things, and at the moment it's the chaff around it really that you see experimentation with. People do take the Terminators, but that's a very alpha strikey all-in list. It's not for the faint-hearted. I think you would take Chaos Cultists are nice to have a little scout move, just move some chaff up the board. Zangor can sit on an objective and farm you additional CP, and again more OC2 for just throwing onto points or blocking things. So they definitely have a place. And I know Poolbridge uses Zangor a lot in those kinds of ways, but it's all very meta dependent. And then there's the Mutalith Vortex Beast, which is a bit of a mystery. It's a very tanky thing. It gives you 36-inch range on a lot of your Cabal powers, which is phenomenal. Very durable as well. But it's just, again, as you're seeing with a list like this, if you look at what's in there, everything in it is Cabal generation, except for about 100 points at the end, 150 points at the end. That is what you need. You need Cabal points. The army lives and dies by it. If you start losing units and losing Cabal points, you end up in an enormous amount of trouble. The Exalted Sorcerer on the disc with Lord of Forbidden Law is a lot of fun. You can often have him yeeting out of a rhino, slowing something's movement, and then yeeting back into it with his move again. A real prick.
Okay. So next up we have got tips and tricks for Thousand Suns. This is a really weird one because there's so many different combinations of stratagems and rituals. It's really difficult to keep track of it all, and there's all different combinations.
Yeah.
The most important ones, I think, this is just me looking at it. The double move, I think, is the most important one.
It's crucial, yeah.
The ignore armor saves and doom bolt. I think those are the ones that change matchups quite a lot.
Completely.
So double move is how many points?
5 Cabal points.
5 Cabal points, and that lets you move a unit. It's just another normal move in the shooting phase,
straight up second move, yeah. In the
okay.
shooting phase, that's the crucial thing. So any of the sort of move away from you, sneaky that people do, all tends to have happened in the movement phase. And likewise, rapid ingress has happened. End of the movement phase. So someone can rapid ingress in, I'm going to get you, and then Magnus just goes, hello, just kills them immediately. So
you can't charge after that move, right?
No, you can't charge. Okay. But with a souped up Magnus, you don't need to a lot of the time.
Yeah, true. How many points does ignore armor save? 9, I think?
9, that's the most expensive one. It's often the one that you don't use unless there's something absolutely clutch to kill a tank. I mean, Thousand Suns don't really have anti-tank guns. They have souped-up Magnus or souped-up psychic weapons, but they don't have raw gun sort of anti-tank weaponry. You could use Forge Fiends or whatever, but... there's just certain units that this absolutely decimates. Things that are relying on a 2-up save, so a Land Raider or Wraith Guard, things for whom that is the basis of their durability. Broadsides, these kinds of things. I know, I'm too soon. There's certain things that just absolutely melt when you have this in your locker, and I think people do need own land forts. Votan Hearthguard, just entire 300-point Bricker Hearthguard just falls over. So it's phenomenal, and it's absolutely clutch. And managing your Cabal economy so that you can do that alongside the utility stuff like the move again is always the challenge, really.
Because that doesn't ignore invulns, right? So that's kind of like if you have a unit with invulnerable saves.
Good invuln saves still very much help you against this.
And then lastly is the Doom Bolt, which is 18-inch range, D3 plus 3 mortals, right?
18-inch range, yes, exactly that. And on a 6, I think it's 6 plus D3, which is hilarious. And this is one of those ones that even on a 1 doesn't completely fail, it's just D3. So this is, it's just great. Again, that is often enough. You pop that and then some rubric shoot or something, that'll do it a lot of the time, depending on the target. Yeah. And it goes, being able to go straight through certain kinds of defenses is really handy.
Yeah. This is the one that I was thinking of when we saw Chaos Knights on the performance well against
I suspect that's the big factor, right? You can Doom Bolt 2 Armigers, flame them down, that's it, right? That's 2 a turn before you've even started with Magnus. I need to play that matchup again, see if I can do better.
And then I just put every stratagem as a banger because it really is. I think every stratagem in this detachment is absolutely solid. I think almost all of them have a potential to just catch you out.
Yeah.
Then a 9-inch range plus 9-inch range for psychic weapons for 1 CP is one of those ones where you have to constantly keep it in mind just to make sure that you don't get Magnus being like, I'm going to plus 2 movement and plus 9-inch range, and I'm going to reach this unit that you thought was out of range.
Oh hell yeah, yeah.
So that one's I think it's really really important. A main combo I think you see a lot of the time is. Or one you see used a lot is reroll hits and wounds for psychic weapons.
Yeah, it's just
big for Magnus.
Magnus without it is fine. Magnus with it is very, very good.
Because keep in mind the detachment rule for Thousand Suns is you pick one of sustained dev wounds or lethal hits, I believe it is.
Exactly that. And so for Magnus, you've got a choice there. He has dev wounds on his big gun anyway. So you can just go for sustained and get more hits. So I often run it that way. This is why he killed 7 knobs on Overwatch at the weekend with just one volley, complete insanity. But he also, you had the option of just going full dev and just even with big gun, little gun, just churning out a bunch of dev wounds onto something.
And the other one I think this is really big on is if you do see Terminators.
Yes. So the Terminator bomb, probably a little bit too expensive right now, but I played an RTT with it and I loved it. It's so aggressive and belligerent, and you turn the bolt weapons to psychic weapons and then reroll hits and wounds with everything, that is a lot of shots. It is very, very silly.
Yeah. Then we also have the indirect fire and ignores cover for psychers using psychic weapons.
Yeah.
Which is provided that you have another psyker there to see the target.
Yeah, so you need a line of sight. This is where your Discourse Sorcerer comes in. You know, he eats out, he looks at something, then he goes away after triggering the strat. It's phenomenally powerful. 2 CP is a lot in the current game. And because the only strat they can tap for free now is the reroll hits and wounds, this one is a dangerous one. You have to be very careful with your CP management. I think it's one of the things Thousand Sons can live and die by. And I've definitely had games where I've used the artillery a couple of times and I'm like, I just don't have any resources to do anything else. But obviously to have it in a moment where you just need to dig something out without committing yourself or sticking your head out is huge, especially in the early game when they're trying to sit tight and whittle their enemy away without losing all of your sorcerers and your cabal points.
That's the double-edged sword, right, of having a lot of knobs to pull on all these units. Is that there's a lot of knobs to pull, and you don't know which ones to pull or how much.
I think that's where, if you look at that Paul Bridge list, he's simplified it right down that if you're thinking about who's getting the secret source in that list, it's Magnus every time, right? Every other unit is fairly simple and basic. And I think that's the way why we've gone towards Rubric Span. It's keep it simple, make sure Magnus gets all the magic beans and the magic dust, and then avoid ending up cut between your resources. If you try and load up 2 at once, you can often fall short.
And then we've got 2 nice little defensive ones. 1 CP, reduce the damage to 0. Is that after a failed save or before?
It is after the failed save.
Oh, even better.
It's so
ridiculous.
Good. It's silly, yeah.
And then one that's obviously hilarious in the mirror is a 4+ feel no pain versus psych attacks, and will make those attacks hazardous.
It's so stupid, yeah. It's extremely silly.
Or if you just want to make Grey Knights cry.
Yeah. Very funny.
But yeah, I feel like we could sit here and talk about all the different combinations a Thousand Sons could do for like an hour.
Yeah, it's an incredibly complex and enjoyable army. It's a lot of fun to play, and it can go really right or really wrong, as I found out this weekend.
Okay. So the last thing I want to ask you, Tom, for this faction, is if there's one like thing you would tell people playing against Thousand Sons for the first time, what do they need to keep an eye on?
I think in terms of dealing with them, you've always got to be avoiding getting alpha struck by a teleporting crystal unit. You want to just do basic screening for that. I think being aware of the sheer amount of damage they can pump out from a single point is really important. And they are one of those armies where I actually think a lot of the time the danger can be respecting them too much and letting them do their tricks for 5 turns unimpeded, right? If you stand off them and they just get to do Doom Bolt, remove save, shoot you with Magnus for 5 turns, it's really hard to come back from that. And they tend to struggle more. They're a bit like Eldar in that sense. They struggle into overload and being overwhelmed and actually being forced to use and lose assets quickly. That's why things like Orcs are good into them, because they just put them in a situation where everything has to get out and start fighting or it's going to crumble. So I think those are the big things. And obviously the move again. The move again is always the killer thing. You know, if they want to reach you and get a bead on you, they are almost always going to. So you have to be extremely careful with that. And actually sometimes it's about screening the space they could land in or exist in. Where could Magnus land first that he might then want to move again from? Where might a unit come in that it would then move again and tuck in and get around a ruin? It's not good enough to be behind a ruin. They might be able to walk around it. You need to have something out in front of it to screen and anticipate. The honest truth is that trying to manage all of these things at once is very difficult. So my advice is just shoot them off the board or chop them up to bits.
Awesome. Okay, so that pretty much covers Thousand Sons, I think.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the next faction is Chaos Demons.
Oh, lovely demons. Very good.
So Chaos Demons have an overall win rate of 44%, a play rate of 3%, and they have 1 event win to their name. They perform best against Necrons. This is pre-Codex Necrons. Death Guard, 53% as well, and Custodies was 65%. In terms of what they perform worst against, we've got Tau Empire, 26%, Chaos Knights for 32%, and Leagues of Votan for 29%.
There's a running theme there that they just don't like being absolutely bodied by guns, do they, by the look of it?
Yeah, generally not, which is really strange because Chaos Knights force you to take more battle shock tests than you normally would. Yeah. And that's normally something the demons quite like, because if you pass a battle shock test, you heal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so that's saying something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Custodies is an interesting one. I'm trying to work out. I guess maybe the big monsters just simply slap through Custodies at a rate they can't handle.
Yeah, I have to imagine Shalaxi ruins Custodes Day.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even funny.
And I guess Necrons and Death Guard, it's similar things where they've got some melee, but it's not good melee. So if they start having to tangle with enormous monsters that are going to just outlast them over a couple of turns, that's pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Custodes probably don't win combats against large Chaos Demons.
No, probably not. This is one of those armies where they obviously had such a strong end to ninth. They were really powerful, and they have a lot of the fundamental tools from that time now. But I think just their general output and threat is less, and there's a lot more trickery and jank amongst the other armies of the game that's made it a lot harder for them. I think it's still in good hands, still a phenomenal army, and can really pull a number over someone. But there's just a little bit strong. And they actually took nerfs in the last slate, which I think were a bit preemptive to various monsters and different things. So they're probably not quite enough on the board right now, but we'll see how they manage that.
Okay, so they're most wanted. The thing about demons is, again, kind of similar to Thousand Suns. You see a couple of units that are very common, and then everything else is kind of just a grab bag.
I think this is very
reference.
common. I think when a faction isn't regarded as the be all and end all, I think you see this a lot more because you don't have that same horde of top players all trying to do this, trying to outdo each other and gradually streamlining everything down to a fine point, which just means people are kind of free to do whatever they like. I think that's great.
So the two most common units I found in this was Be'lakor and Shalaxi, and Nurglings. But I don't really think we need to mention Nurglings. Like, they infiltrate and they do teleport homers. That's that's Nurglings. So Be'lakor, he's got two key things I think that make him a common pick. The first one is he creates a shadow of chaos 6 inches around him.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of stratagems that key off of that. And there is the detachment rule, which kicks off of that as well. So you have 6-inch deep strike. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And then the other ability is one of his Lord of Shadow abilities, I think it's called. But it prevents units outside of 18 inches from shooting at units within 6 inches of him.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive, isn't it? It's two incredibly powerful buffs, offense and defense. Draws them towards you, which is where they don't want to be, and then he can just drop down very scary, punchy things straight into their face. And you'll often see this where he hides. The opponents start getting into business. He suddenly comes flying out somewhere, drops Greater Demon or a big slab of punchy demons, and they just go to town. It's really cool.
And then next up we have Shalaxi. Shalaxi is the there's a term for it. When you have that star player on the team that gets all the points, scores all the goals for you, gets all the home runs. That's Shalaxi, right?
She's ridiculous. Yeah.
So Shalaxi is gets massive damage and sort of utility bonuses against monsters, vehicles, and character units. She rerolls charges into them, and then her 6 attacks at strength 14, AP3 D6 plus 2. And then the other 4 strength 6, AP2 damage 3. They all reroll hit, wound, and damage versus those as well.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, she's also quite hard to kill with 20 wounds, toughness 10, 4 plus involt, and a 5 plus feel no pain. And since it's all keyed off your units, if you have a character leading a unit, she just gets the benefit versus the whole unit.
Yeah, she's just very, very scary. Just absolutely mashes things.
So she can just ruin people's day.
Yeah, it's not generally a book that has amazing output. Like, it's concentrated in just a few places, but she is just quite remarkable.
Yeah. But they're like fairly simple. It's not much like trickery as to why those units are good. They're just really, like, their numbers are just really solid, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And obviously Be'lakor's utility is very, very, very strong.
Oh, so good, yeah.
So moving on to making the list, I have taken. I've not labelled it. This is Franco's Nottingham GT list. Franco.
Hey, we love you, Franco.
He is the UK's #1 Demons player.
Damn right.
So I made sense to take his list. So we got Be'lakor and Shalaxi, as mentioned before. We have the Blue Scribes, which is a nice little lone-up unit. You have 4 units of 3 Nurglings. We got 2 units of 10 Pink Horrors, 10 Plague Bearers, 6 Blood Crushers, 6 Blood Crushers.
Yeah, so a Blood Crusher slab is a very funny thing. It hits like a freight train, and obviously, as we've just discussed, you've got this or around Bellicor, where you can suddenly be like, surprise, and they can just be absolutely crashing. They do a huge amount of impact mortals, and then they're very good melee unit as well. Really nasty.
So we've got 2 units of 3 Fiends and 3 Flamers to finish
Yeah,
the
I'd
list.
I'd say this is actually an incredibly balanced take from Franco. Franco sort of swings in between experimenting with monster mash or, mass chaff and utility, and this kind of hits the sweet spot between the two. It's not going to give up anything really secondaries wise. It's not going to rely too heavily on just jamming monsters or just jamming chaff. So it's got a bunch of stuff to score. Pink Horrors are this really annoying, deceptive unit that's quite hard to remove. It's got little things that it can drop down and sort of nick objectives with or cause trouble. And also it's got your 3 big precision threats in the Blood Crushers, Bellicor and Shilaxi, who will go and smash the key target. So it's a really nice sort of very balanced take on demons, I think.
Yeah, and it really can go from like 0 to 60 really fast as well.
Yeah, that's typically demons have that term where they just sort of everything seems fine, and then suddenly they pull your throat out, and that's how the army plays. It's like sort of chaos GSC in a way. It's going to have its moment where it suddenly tries to get you in the key places, and then sort of reap the reward of that, and then play to try and grind out a lead. So yeah, it's very interesting.
All right. So tips and tricks. So interesting. The army plays around Battle Shock a lot, like Tyranids do.
Yep.
Because, well, if you're in the shadow of chaos and you take a failed Battle Shock test, you take some more wounds. But also, if you fail those Battle Shock tests, you're going to struggle to hold the objectives. If your units on the objective are failing, then the shadow of chaos is going to spread, and then it's going to make it easier for the chaos player to sort of consolidate that
completely.
So it kind of when I've played against teams before, it's kind of like a snowball effect. Like once you start failing them, you have to take more, and then you just got to start failing more, and then you got to take more, and it's just a big cycle.
Yeah, and they are an army that snowballs. That's a very good way of putting it. Right, things in general with your positioning and with your handling them. If a couple of things go wrong, it can get really really bad really quickly.
Yeah. So the other thing is keeping track of where the Shadow of Chaos is and when the opponent can change it is really important because it's on a phase by phase basis. So it's really important to know like what strats key when. For example, there is an advance and charge strat as long as you start in the Shadow of Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So those Blood Crushers, if they start within range of Bellicor, be inside the Shadow of Chaos, then they can just advance and charge on the forward. Or if you just move forward, advance, and then get onto an objective, that then I guess you wouldn't be able to do it that way. But you start in your own deployment zone, and then advance and charge out. Spread it around. So it's really that's part of what I mean by it can go so fast so quickly.
Completely.
But if you're playing against an army that struggles with leadership, it can be really difficult to handle.
Mm-hmm.
Like armies like Guard, like Tau.
Votan are also low leadership.
Yeah. Those kind of armies really do struggle with that sort of thing.
Yeah, completely.
And then lastly, I put reserve plane screening is vital.
Yeah.
So screening for obvious reasons, heavy deep strike army demons. So playing into that, they can 3-inch deep strike that as one of their strats. That's obviously very difficult to screen out and prevent them from.
You can't stop it altogether, but you can stop. You can at least stop it being the way they steal primary from you. Right, that's the killer thing. Never let them just be 3-inch deep striking onto a point. That's a very cheap way to lose primary. Make them come and fight you for it properly.
But most of the time, it will be 6-inch deep strike because a good demon player will manipulate the shadow in such a way.
Exactly that.
Like rapid ingressing onto objectives in your turn to flip where the shadow is a big thing as well.
It's huge, yeah, absolutely huge.
So there's a lot of tricks to do with that.
So many tricks, and I think demons are one of those armies where you are going to get hit by them. They are going to come out of the ether and they're going to hit you. So there's no point trying to prevent that from happening. You have to make sure it happens to things you can afford to lose in places you are happy for it to happen. And then you need to be able to capitalize on it. Again, they haven't got many assets, as you saw in that list. There's 3 killer units in Franco's list. You've got to be able to absorb those and then drive them off. And then at that stage, cleaning up and dealing with the chaff and other things becomes much easier. But they're going to get you. They're going to get you in your soft bits. So you have to have a plan for that.
All right. But that's basically what we have for demons. The thing is, some of these factions we're covering today is they're not massively played.
No, this is quite a rare entity right now.
Yeah.
We saw a couple of interesting demons lists at Nottingham. Haidar with his blood crushers, different things. I'm curious. Maybe there's a thinking somewhere that goes, oh, maybe this is good into Necrons. Maybe this can hit Necrons in places they don't like. But we'll see. We'll see. I think in the main, this is a bit like Grey Knights. The actual, and to be honest, 1,000 times the same. You're looking at that suite of tools and you're going, very cool stuff in here. But at the moment, they don't quite have the critical mass of things to be a big bad in the meta. But that doesn't mean you don't want to watch out for them, because if you don't know what this does, you will lose to it.
Yeah. But just because they're not around in the meta so much, they have such a low play rate, there's less. I guess there's less to talk about in terms of preparing for them.
Completely.
So yeah. Right. So that moves on to our last faction for
Here we
today.
go.
So speaking of factions that aren't played very much,
oh my god,
it's the Imperial Knights.
Yeah.
So the Imperial Knights have an overall win rate of 43%.
It's bad, isn't it? It's bad.
Yeah, 0 event wins and a 3% play rate. How the mighty have fallen from the first
Yeah.
data slate. Good lord. So they perform best against Tau Empire with 65%.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Chaos Knight 65% and Necron 63%.
Yep.
And then they perform worst against Leagues of Votan at 26%, Orcs at 34%, and World Eaters for 32%.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I think there's some stuff that makes sense. I mean, Votan into Imperial Knights, you just slap Judgment on anything that's a big knight, and then you'll just kill all the little ones anyway because you've got good guns. So it's awful. It's a horrible. It's a horrific matchup for the Imperial Knights. And then Orcs, yeah, they've got some good anti-vehicle heavy hitters in there, and I guess they can just flood the board and push you off the points. And then World Eaters much the same. Just go right through you without you ever seeing them.
I feel like most Imperial Knights lists are very shooting based and not much combat. And then obviously when you do get to combat, you don't get the invulnerable save from Ion Shields.
Yeah, which is huge.
So I feel like they tend to fold in combat a lot faster than they do at range.
Yeah, the tower one's interesting to me. Do you want to explain that one? What's the logic there, you think?
So I think there's a couple of things. One I think is the obsec thing.
Okay, yeah.
I think the objective control thing. Imperial Knights hold primary a lot better than Tau do, just because they have single models that have a lot of OC.
Yeah.
Tau don't have many models that can rival that. They're certainly not leads and spam. They're also not easy for breaches to take out.
No.
So they're just kind of like knocks out a unit that can deal with that you have to deal with stuff. And lastly, the Feel No Pain is really, really, really annoying. There's nothing more annoying in the game than a 6++.
Represent.
It does change a lot of stuff. And the 4+ Ion Shields again is a bit of a range, can be a bit of a pain. You can just sometimes not kill stuff, and then things go badly for you. Then you can't flip primary, and it just becomes a bit of a nightmare. So it does make sense to me. I remember when Imperial Knights were at the top of their game, it felt impossible.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that anymore,
No.
but it is still difficult
in
the sense of.
Necrons is interesting. I mean, that's just the usual. They have a lot of guns, so I guess they can lift Necrons before they close. I'd be interested to see that at the moment and see if that's still the case, but I've simply not seen the matchup played. So
yeah, with this being pre Necron Codex, I have to imagine this is mostly
this is old data, isn't it?
Yeah. So if it's Warrior spam builds, I think you're looking at just the fact that they can out OC them on objectives. If you put 2 armigers on, that's a lot of OC. And you will kill a lot of those Necron warriors with your shooting. So I think it's another situation where they're able to hold primary.
Yeah.
The Chaos Knight one is very funny to me. I have no idea how that's
Yeah,
happened.
I don't understand that whatsoever because I'm thinking about it. I was like, Chaos Knights should absolutely just fuck up Imperial Knights every time. So that must be
It's not just
from back in the day, right?
yeah, it's not just like a low number of games either. It is
No,
like 30 to 40 games.
yeah,
So
no idea.
it's
Bizarre.
it's decent chunk of data.
That's
It's
very
just really
funny.
strange.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
the
okay.
only thing I can imagine is that the Imperial Knights more tend to take the big knights
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than the war dog spam. So I can only imagine that the big knights handle the war dogs quite easily. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only thing I can
Yeah,
think
that
of off
makes
the top of my head.
sense. That makes sense. Yep.
Um, all right, so we can move on to the next one we had. So most wanted. So the two units that I'd see sort of most commonly in this. Basically, every list has an Armiger Helver, and most lists have a Knight Crusader.
Yep.
Um, a lot of lists also take this is well. There's a bunch of knights. A lot of people trying out a lot of stuff as we said before for Chaos Demons, and it tends up being a bit of a grab bag.
Completely. Yeah.
But Knight Crusader is the dedicated shooting knight. It stands still and gets sustained on its weapons, and it has like 18 shots, strength 2, maybe 2 damage 2 or something. With the Gatling cannon, and then the rapid fire battle cannon is like 2d6 plus 3, I think, or 2d6 plus 6 at short range.
Yeah.
With sustained, again, it's just a lot of damage output for what it is, and it also increases the shooting efficiency of the armor just because it can give those +1 to hit. The Helverins, they have for 150 points, getting 8 strength, 9 AP, 1 damage, 3 shots is really solid.
Yeah, it's very good.
You know, for what it is, considering it's uh, objective control 8, that's like it's just a solid profile for the points that you pay. The main issue with Imperial Knights, I think, is the big knights.
Definitely.
But yeah, so yeah, there's strats that also synergize quite well with the armigers. You can give up to two or more of your armigers can all get +1 AP when shooting one target,
Yeah, it's very good.
which is very good for autocannon profiles,
Yeah, it
and then
helps them
+1
massively.
damage
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Yeah, you can see how it's kind of set up. It's big boy, little guys just shooting. Really, that seems to be how this index wants to play.
yeah, that's pretty much what it is too. And back when towering.
Yeah, that was towering.
Towering.
Yeah, towering was right. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of the the rule that they had, where they could just see whatever they
Yeah,
wanted to.
that was it. It was towering. It was only
Yeah,
6 months ago. I've kind of put it to the back of my mind and forgotten about it.
yeah. I couldn't remember if it was Titanic or whatever it was, but
Well, yeah, it applies to them. But yeah, it was towering. Yeah.
yeah, it's just their ability to see everything on the board was what made them
God, it was
crazy.
ridiculous.
So
It was so ridiculous.
yeah, but this is what we're dealing with now. Yeah, mostly shooting faction. So if we look at the list, really hard to find knight lists from anywhere recent.
Yeah.
That's not just like a pure meme list. Like it's knights with 1,000 points of allies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
6 Helverins, whatever it is. Um, kind of the list that was bouncing around, sort of like a Crusader, a Warden, 6 Armigers, an Assassin. Again, it's kind of similar to when we did the Chaos Knights. There isn't really much variation because there's so few number of units. It's kind of a weird mix, but you can have sticky objectives with the banner enhancement, and you can give 2 people -1 damage, 2 little knights -1 damage, or you can flip those around if you wanted to, and give 2 knights +1 to hit. That's also a thing you can do. But then, so tips and tricks. So as we said, ranged is the game that Imperial Knights want to play. So if you let them sit in the midboard, getting multiple armigers on the midboard, loads of OC, and just shooting you, you're going to have a bad time. Ideally, if you can get in combat and dodge the ion shield, they tend not to like that, as orcs and world eaters have proved.
Yeah.
And then using the terrain is something that you're going to have to. It's kind of have to rewire your brain into how the terrain works with the towering rule, because they will ignore the one that they're standing on,
Yeah.
but they won't ignore the other ones.
Yep.
So you need to sort of give a rethink about terrain and how that works. But then beyond that, it's kind of just you kind of are just got to be able to shoot the knights down or combat the knights down.
Yeah,
That's really what it comes
it's
down
just
to.
about not letting them ever activate a large chunk of their army at once, because they'll just do an enormous amount of damage, and you just need to get that body count down to a point where they just lose access to enough models to actually play the game. That's always the crucial thing. Can you get to turns 4 and 5 and there's only 2 or 3 of them left? And then there's no way they're scoring and doing the primary and other things, because at the start they're very oppressive on the primary because they've got great OC on points. There's a lot of assets. So you have to break that right down, halve it in the first couple of turns, and then get them down, whittle it down. If you can kill one of the big ones, that's ideal. But you have to just set yourself a job. A couple of knights this turn, couple of knights this turn. Now we're hitting the point where there's really not much of it left, and just steadily whittle away.
Yeah. And so I think that pretty much covers it. I think part of the reason Imperial Knights are not doing great is because they're very straightforward to deal with nowadays.
Yeah. It's very meat and potatoes, and it's had its one gimmick kind of taken away. I guess they're kind of victims of this kind of beta testing launch that we had, where something like towering can be introduced and just crush everything, and then literally not exist within a couple of months, right? So they'll come back completely different. I'm sure they'll have to be reconfigured now. But until they are, and until we see some rules changes for them, they're not really going to be able to hang.
Yeah, they're like that. Never mind. Just, like a bad cold, they always come back.
Exactly. That's
wasn't what I was originally going to say.
That's the one, Jack.
Yeah,
always,
bad cold.
Bad cold always comes back. Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, that basically covers it for the 3 factions that we had on for this week. Next time we're going to be looking at AdMech.
Very exciting.
I think it'll be very interesting to look at AdMech and how to beat them, because you don't see them super often, but they have a very, very good win rate right now.
It's a spicy book. Yeah.
So in the sort of preliminary early stages of this meta that we are in. So that's going to be really interesting. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure, as always.
I don't know if you'll be on the next one or not. Who knows?
We'll have a look. I'm open to it. I'm quite interested. I've actually got the AdMech book in the room behind me, so that'd be quite a fun excuse to crack that out.
We've got several AdMech enthusiasts on.
We certainly do.
So we should be able to sort something out there. So that's it from us. So say goodbye, Tom.
Bye.
And say goodbye,
I'm not
Jack.
as good at Thousand Suns as I thought, but I'm going to tell everyone about that later.
And say goodbye, Jack. Goodbye, Jack. And until next time, see you later.